Let me continue from the previous video. Plato said in his Theaetetus, you know, it's a dialogue. We all know that most of the books written by Plato is said as dialogue because it is based on a interaction process. The writings of Plato's are based on an interaction process between Socrates and Plato. You all know that Socrates didn't write anything on philosophy. Then how we know Socrates? We know Socrates from the writings of Plato, and those writings were known as dialogues. Why dialogues? Because most of the books written by Plato are in the form of interaction between Socrates and Plato himself. That is why these are called dialogue. And the one of the famous dialogue is known as Republic. You know that. Then the next one is Theaetetus. Theaetetus is one of the famous dialogue, and there he has established the theory of knowledge, and he has criticized the view of sophists on knowledge. He has criticized sophist view on knowledge, particularly that knowledge is perception adopted by the sophist. Here, Plato was criticizing certain points given by sophists about knowledge. Firstly, Socrates, firstly, Plato criticized the sophist view about knowledge, particularly in the dialogue Theaetetus, and Plato first said that if we accept knowledge as perception, then the whole knowledge, the system of knowledge which is dependent on perception will be impermanent, because perceptual knowledge today, what I perceive, tomorrow it may change. For example, if you see, uh, suppose you have different experience about a particular person today, tomorrow you may have different experience. So perception may give you different knowledge in different times. That is why, according to Plato, perception cannot give us a perfect or permanent knowledge, which, if it is to be knowledge, it should be permanent, it should be common. But according to Plato, if we accept the sophist view that is knowledge is perception, then that type of knowledge cannot give us common or permanent knowledge. That is the criticism forwarded by Plato against the sophist. See what Plato did. Plato is going to establish his own view about knowledge, but before establishing that, he has criticized sophist view of knowledge. And first, that is the first point. And secondly, Plato said that perceptual knowledge is contradicted. According to Plato, perceptual knowledge is contradicted because he said a object, if you are perceiving one object from near less distance, then you will find that okay, that object is bigger. But if you perceive the same object from a far distance, then it will look small. So it is, depending on the positions, you are perceiving the object differently, means it is self contradicted knowledge. You are getting the self contradicted knowledge according to Plato. Thirdly, Plato said, if we accept the view of sophists, that is knowledge is perception, then the whole process of knowledge will be problematic. There will be no need of the training of knowledge, there will be no need of the counseling how to get the proper knowledge, etc., because perception is perception, and there will be no difference between your perception and the perception of the children. So as children perceive the world differently, you, the matured human being, perceive the world differently. In that case, there will be no difference between the perception of the children as well as the perception of the youth. So that, the process of training, of acquiring knowledge by sense perception will be meaningless if we accept sophist view of knowledge. The next, in fourthly, Plato said Protagoras' view is again contradicted because which is true for us may not be true for another. That is, again, almost all the points are similar. Still, they have different sphere, they have different aspect. Means what is true for you may not be true for other. Then True for you means it is true according to your own knowledge, and that is not true according to his knowledge. So, depending on the knowledge means perceptual knowledge, the object truthfulness of the same object will be different. Then, in that way, the knowledge will not be perfect. Next, Plato said, the theory of knowledge adopted by sophists will disturb or de-establish the objectivity of knowledge. What is the objectivity of truth? Objectivity of knowledge or objectivity of truth means a truth is truth, it exists objectively. Knowledge is there, it exists objectively. For example, milk is white, it is objectively true. Sun rises in the east, it is objectively true. Okay, but if we accept knowledge is perception, then according to Plato, it will de-establish, mane naikia kori dibo the objectivity of truth. Bostugoto hoittotai naikia kori dibo, because in that way knowledge will be dependent on the subjective perception, and in that way the objectivity of truth or objectivity of knowledge will be vanished. Can you understand what is objectivity of truth means? Truth exists objectively. It is, if you just remember the theory of realism. Realism says external world do not dependent on your perception. External world doesn't depend on your perception. It is there. It exists there independently. The same is the case when you are talking about the objectivity of truth. It means truth is there. You can know it or you may not know it, but it is there objectively. But if we accept sophist view, that is knowledge is perception, means knowledge depends on perception, and perception will differ from person to person, then the truth will differ from person to person, and in that way the objectivity of truth will be vanished. And this is one of the difficulty of sophist theory of knowledge according to Plato. Then what Plato did, Plato said, how we know the individual. Now let us come to the point of position of Plato. Plato said the world is it is divided into two heads, the world of universal and the world of particular. We are living in the world of particular. I am a man, I am a particular man. You are a man, you are a particular man. That is dog, that is a particular dog. Now, how can you know that dog? Plato said it is not merely by the perception. How we know the dog? I know the dog depending on my previous knowledge about dogness. The class character of dogness I know already. That is why I can identify that dog as a particular dog. In that class, I said, if one individual, suppose Abhijit, he is sitting among 50 tigers. In spite of being perceiving in that position, I cannot accept Abhijit as a tiger, because immediately after perceiving Abhijit among the tigers, I can recollect the manness, the class character of man, and then I can say he is a man. So Plato said knowledge is not merely perception. It is a process. What type of process? Where you are depending on some memory. Now how you can recollect you can recollect it depending on your reasoning capacity. Depending on reasoning capacity, you are recollecting that, and then you can identify, okay, he is a man. So it is not merely self-perception. It is not merely self-perception. It is the reason, it is the intellectual capacity depending on which you are having the knowledge according to Plato. One very interesting point added by Plato is that Plato said we have another world. Before taking part in this world, we are in another world. In that world, we have perceived all the world of universals, all the class characters we had perceived. Suppose manness is there as a substance, dogness is there as a substance, cowness is there as a substance, and we are there in that world of universal. After taking birth in the world of particular, when I perceive a particular man, I immediately can remember that manness which I have perceived in my in another world, in that world of universal, and now though I am in world of particular, still I can remember that manness, and after perceiving a particular man, I can say, okay, he is a man because he is similar to that class, that is manness. So that is how we know something. So this is, obviously Plato, because of all these grounds, obviously Plato will reject the view of sophists that is knowledge is perception.